Hi guys, it's Nick, and today we have another episode of Relaxing Reviews. This episode is a little bit different because today I'm going to be looking at a piece of software as opposed to a piece of hardware like I've done in past. And the software in question today is a screen recording and streaming solution called Mirillis Action. And when I was first contacted by Mirillis about potentially testing out their software, I have to admit I was a little bit skeptical. And that's because there are a variety of free solutions for recording your screen and your gameplay and streaming it to the internet these days. And so my immediate response was, well, what does this software offer that these free solutions don't? Does the $30 US one-time purchase cost, can it be justified by what this software offers? So that was the question that I set out to answer over the last few weeks while I've been testing this software out. And if you'd like to know the answer right away, you can, of course, skip right to the conclusion. It's down in the timestamps, which are in the video description. And I like to say up front that if you do decide that Mirillis Action sounds like something for you, something you'd like to purchase, there's also a link right there where you can do so in the video description. And for what it's worth, there's currently a sale going on. It's $20 US as opposed to 30, and that's really limited time relative to when I'm getting this video out. You probably have something like 12 hours or something. So if you're part of the notification squad, you're early here, you can take advantage of that offer and click through and get it for a 33% discount. Worth taking a look at. If, however, you're watching this video a bit later, you missed the deal, but you'd still like to own the software, I might have something for you coming up real soon. Between you and me, I'm going to be doing a giveaway. I'm going to have some keys for Mirillis Action to be giving away to some lucky viewers, and I'll be posting a video about that later in the week. So that'll be your opportunity to get Mirillis Action for 100% free. So stay tuned for that. But in the meantime, is this software worth your time at all? Again, with this glut of free options available, like NVIDIA's GeForce Experience share functionality, AMD Radeon's Read Live screen recording functionality, or even the old standby OBS, which of course is used for streaming and can also do screen recording. Lots of options there for the cost of $0. So there's a high bar for Mirillis Action to overcome here. So what we're going to do here today is look at the software. I'm going to do a detailed tour of the software's features. Then I'm going to do some benchmarking and provide you with some graphs looking at the performance of this screen recording software, the performance impact that's incurred while recording or streaming. And finally, I'm going to do an image quality comparison where we look at the quality of the video produced by some of these other solutions versus the quality of the video output from Mirillis Action. Once that's all done, we will reconvene for the conclusion where I'll summarize our findings and provide you with a purchasing recommendation. I'll let you know ultimately what I thought of this software. So with all that housekeeping aside, let's take a nice chill look at Mirillis Action. So here we have the main screen of Action. this is the screen that you're presented with when you start up the software. And the first thing that you'll notice is that it has a fairly attractive and well organized user interface, which is, in my opinion, quite intuitive. On the left hand side here we have our recording library and our file browsing options and those sorts of things. It's empty right now. I'm not recording this video with Action. In fact, somewhat ironically, I suppose, I'm recording it with NVIDIA's recording functionality built into their GeForce Experience software. And the reason I'm doing that is because there's a handful of features in Action which I wouldn't be able to show you properly were I recording with it right now. So that's the justification there. But on the right hand side of the screen here, we have all of our various functions of the software separated out into orderly tabs, and those are what we're going to be looking through over the course of this video review. We're going to be going through the options that are available to us. So the default tab that we start in is video recording, which makes sense since that's the primary function of this software. And we have several recording modes that we're presented with. The first is the so-called Games and Applications mode, which will record the active window as long as it's OpenGL or DirectX, so games essentially. The next one over is called the active screen mode, and this is basically your desktop capture mode, which will record anything that's visible on your screen. And you can see that it's given us a little FPS counter in the upper right hand corner of the screen here. That is visible to the person doing the recording, but not to the video, so that FPS counter is not recorded onto the video unless you turn it on. I think there may be an option. We'll look into that in a moment. It also has a little recording status indicator and tells you how much available hard drive space you have left, which are handy things to know, handy information to have. So that is, of course, also visible in the Games and Applications mode, but because we don't have any OpenGL or DirectX apps focused right now, it's not visible, whereas in this mode it pops up by default because this will record the whole screen. So moving along, we have this handy feature right here, active desktop region recording. And as you can imagine, this allows you to define a customized region of the desktop to record. You can save presets for different resolutions. You can have this preset region snap to Windows. You can, of course, move it around and resize it arbitrarily. You can capture screenshot with that button. This also works in streaming live modes. This is a very handy feature, and one which I have in fact already made use of. If you watched my relaxing reviews video where I look at the eBlue M639 gaming mouse, there's a segment in that review where I filmed the mouse driver software, the configuration software, and that is just a small windowed piece of software. And so instead of filming my whole massive desktop, I just used this windowed mode in Action to film only the region of interest on my desktop. So this has come in quite handy for me, and this is a feature that NVIDIA's GeForce Experience software does not offer. So I really appreciate this particular feature, and will no doubt make further use of it in future. So that, and just to show you here, you can drag these out however you want. You can move this window around. It's quite intuitive, straightforward, easy to use. There's a 720p preset. Okay, then moving along, we've got the option to record direct from webcam or an HDMI device, which I have not made use of yet. I've not had a chance to test out, but I suspect it works in a pretty straightforward fashion. As opposed to capturing your screen, it records input from the selected device. So shared amongst these modes are a handful of options. The first is file format. One of the nice things about this software is that it allows you to record to either MP4, which is a compressed video format, or EVI, which is a full quality uncompressed format. The benefit of MP4, of course, is that the file sizes are smaller and the quality is still pretty good. AVI is humongous. The video files end up being very large, but the quality is uncompressed, flawless, basically. So if you have the space and the ability, it sometimes makes sense to record in AVI. But I tend to do my recording in MP4. And in MP4 mode, we have a handful of different hardware acceleration options. So what this means is the video is being encoded in real time. Typically, that would happen on your CPU, but that takes quite a bit of CPU resources. And so what happens is you'll see a decrease in gaming performance as those cycles are dedicated to encoding the video in real time as you're recording. Hardware acceleration allows for offloading of that encoding task to your video card. So we've got a couple of options here. We have disabled, which will use the CPU for encoding. We have NVIDIA NVENC, which is NVIDIA's fixed function hardware encoder on their video cards. And AMD cards have a similar functionality. I don't know what they call it, but most cards, video cards from the last, I want to say 5 years at least, I believe for GeForce cards since the GeForce 600 series, have included these fixed function encoders on the video card. And the great thing about that is that it doesn't impact the GPU's rendering capability because it's a separate little fixed function encoding unit. And it's not stealing cycles from your CPU. So using these modes, you can record MP4 video and encode it in real time with very, very little performance impact, quite negligible. We'll get into that more in a moment. As a matter of fact, I ran some benchmarks to see what the performance impact of these encoding methods is, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But Action gives you the option to use the default NVENC encoder, which is encodes in H.264. It also gives the option to use the HEVC mode, which encodes using H.265, which is a more modern encoding scheme, I guess you'd call it. But in theory, it allows for higher quality video at lower bit rates. And that's another feature that, as a matter of fact, NVIDIA's GeForce Experience software does not have. It records in one mode and one mode only, and that's the H.264 encoding. So it's pretty nice that Action lets you use the H.265 encoder. Of course, here we have video size options. If you want to do it in 240p, you can. Of course, your 1080p option, or original, which just captures at whatever resolution the target software is running at. So that could be 4K, or it could be anything in between. And then we have an FPS selection here. So you can set it to, of course, your 30, your 60, and interestingly, Action has a 120 FPS recording mode, which is yet another feature that it has, which NVIDIA's GeForce Experience does not offer. That only goes up to 60 FPS. So that's pretty cool, having that option there. And then down below here, we have a cluster of options. We can set a fixed duration for the video to record, which is, I've never used that option, but I could see it being useful. You can choose whether to include microphone input or not, including push-to-talk mode or push-to-record mode. You can record webcam input along with your screen input. I don't have my webcam plugged in right now, so it's not available. And then we have the time shift mode, which is what does NVIDIA call it? Action replay or something like that. It has some marketing term, but essentially what it is it keeps a short loop of your last, here, configurable number of minutes of gameplay or whatever you're recording. And then at any point you can press a button to save that to your hard drive. So it's kind of this this rolling window of your last 10 minutes or whatever of gameplay. And the idea is that you just have that on at all times. Then if you do something really awesome or particularly cool afterwards, you can just hit the button and then it'll save that last 10 minutes and capture that cool moment. NVIDIA software offers this as well, but it's a handy function to have, and I'm glad that Action has it as well. Action's time shift allows for up to, let's take a look. I think it's 12 minutes. Yeah, up to 12. Maybe we could get a little further we could probably get to about 13 minutes if we really wanted. I believe NVIDIA's does up to 20 minutes, so it is a little bit longer there, but I can't think of that many scenarios where you would need to suddenly capture the last 20 minutes of your gameplay. Like usually if you do something awesome, it's within the last minute or two, so I don't know that it's a problem that it only goes up to 12 there. And each of these offers some different configurable options down here. Obviously we can't do the what they call their time shift on some of these other modes, but that's fine. Worth mentioning here, if we switch it to AVI mode, the software Action uses its own special CPU based encoder, which is actually pretty good. Because it's running on the CPU, it does steal cycles from your game or whatever you're running, and there's a noticeable impact on frame rates, which we'll see, but it also records, as I mentioned earlier, in extremely high uncompressed quality, so it looks excellent, and that is again something that NVIDIA's software cannot offer, so it's nice to have that option. Okay, let's move along here. Under the Live tab, we have all kinds of streaming options. You can enable streaming, of course. You can choose to save the streamed video to disk as it streams. You can set your video quality, your FPS, your bitrate, all that kind of stuff. You can select your streaming service, and it will stream to a whole wide array of services. Your standards, your Twitch, your YouTube, all that kind of stuff, Facebook, if you really want. and a handful of others as well, which is great to see support for. I have not tested this mode out because, as you guys may know, I don't stream really or at all. It's something that I've considered and something that I would like to do in future, but it's more of a scheduling issue for me than anything. So I cannot really speak to the functionality of this, but I imagine it works pretty well. And it certainly seems to be relatively configurable. In the deeper in the options, we'll see you can load up overlays for your stream. We'll get to that eventually. Okay, and worth saying, you don't obviously have the configurability of something like OBS here, but it's also much simpler to use, whereas OBS can be a real challenge to get set up. There is a simple audio recording mode, so if you would like to record whatever, music tracks for instance, or something like that, or just a conversation, you can do so in both WAV or MP4 format without having to also record the video. And it also has a number of options here, including, you can configure your duration, choose whether you include your microphone input or not, all that kind of stuff. And that can be started and stopped with a hotkey, naturally. This is kind of a useful function. Action has a benchmarking mode built in, and this uses that FPS counter that we saw earlier to benchmark whatever it is that you happen to be recording at the time, or rather benchmarking at the time. Okay, so we've also got a screenshot capture mode, and it looks like earlier I accidentally captured a screenshot. That's funny, because I hit F12, which is for starting my recording with my NVIDIA software, but it's also by default the screenshot capture mode, or hotkey for this software. So, but you can choose between bitmaps, PNGs, or JPEGs. Not a whole lot else to say or see there. And finally, we have our general settings, which are further divided into a bunch of tabs here. And there's a lot of stuff there. I'm not going to go through all of it, but there's a couple of things here that are worth pointing out. One is this Action RCU, which we can toggle on or off. That is a remote control unit, a little physical module that you can actually purchase and then use for with Action. I don't have any use for such a thing, but I could certainly see some specialized situations where perhaps you would use such an item. It's an interesting option, at least. For the video recording settings, there are a few different quality settings. I prefer to record on Ultra. I always like to record in as high quality as I can, or within reason, and then downscale from there if I'm going to be uploading it or whatever. Bitrate option, this is a dynamic range input. You can choose full, so that's basically whether you have the full range of brightness in your colors, or whether you have slightly cropped on either end. And you can choose whether to use multi-core rendering. This would be for using the, I imagine, or I believe anyway, the AVI recording mode, recording to your CPU, can take advantage of multiple cores while it's doing that. So, and then you have this option to record the mouse cursor or not, which is good to have, and you can choose to visualize your mouse clicks, which can be handy for tutorials, for instance, where you want the person or the viewer to be able to track your mouse movements very easily. Okay, so here we have overlay graphics settings, and this is for streaming, or I suppose recording as well, actually. It never occurred to me, but I guess I could use that while recording, whatever. But you can select a file, you can choose positioning, all that stuff. This is webcam stuff, audio stuff, microphone settings, input, and things like that. These are the heads-up display configuration options. You can turn it off, like I said. You can choose to include it or not on desktop recording or with games. And you can choose whether it shows the free space or not. And actually, it's kind of nice. It will also show live streaming viewer statistics. I just noticed that option, if you so choose. Action will also export your videos if you so desire. So you can record them in AVI and then export them from your library in an encoded format using those fixed function encoders, hardware encoders. And then, of course, you got all your hotkeys configurable. So that is a run through of the Action software. And as you can see, it's got a lot of features. And I've used this to record some of the videos, like I said, that you've seen here on the channel. And I find no fault with the UI. I think it's good. The options that are available are excellent. It's really feature-rich piece of software, and that's great. And it's functioned as advertised every time I've used it. I've not run into any bugs or anything like that. But one of the big outstanding questions is, of course, performance. And Mirillis claims that Action has exceptional performance. As a matter of fact, I believe their marketing material claims that it has the highest performance of any video recording software. And I wasn't sure whether that was the case. And so what I did was I went and ran a series of benchmarks using Civilization 6. Civ 6 has a built-in benchmarking tool that plays time demo, or just a fixed demo scene, and reports performance statistics. So this provided a fixed reference benchmark for me to run again and again and get some results from. And what I did was I compared Action's various encoding options, including the H.264 and 265 encoders, as well as the AVI mode with their custom CPU-based encoder. I compared all that to NVIDIA's GeForce Experience software and the performance I get using that to record. And then I did an image quality comparison as well. So let's move on over to that and take a look at performance and image quality. So what you're seeing here is Civilization 6's short graphics benchmark. It just runs through a predetermined scene and provides the frame time and average FPS. I ran these benchmarks at 1080p on ultra settings with 8 times multi-sampling anti-aliasing, and I ran the benchmark for each recording mode 3 separate times and took the average of that in an attempt to reduce the impact of any potential variability between runs. So let's take a look at the benchmark results. Now, before we get too deep into interpreting these graphs, I'd like to give a little bit of a disclaimer, I suppose, which is that I need you to bear in mind I only benchmarked one game for these graphs, Civilization 6, and I, as I mentioned, ran each recording mode 3 times, but this was not an exhaustive benchmarking session by any stretch. And I do not have a dedicated test bed, for instance, on which to benchmark. I just use my own personal PC. So I guess what I'm getting at is that these are not definitive numbers by any stretch, and take them with a grain of salt. I did the best I could with what I have, but just bear all that in mind as we look at these graphs. All that being said, let's take a look at these results. So the first graph here is average frames per second for that little Civ 6 benchmark that you just saw there. And obviously, more frames per second is better. And ideally, you want your average to be over 60. So the good news is that every recording mode I tested did in fact maintain an average frame rate over 60 FPS. But there are a couple of interesting surprises in here. Unsurprisingly, the no recording running option provided the highest average frames per second. And that makes sense because there's no overhead if you're not recording. GFE, which is the GeForce Experience recording solution, showed a very slight but discernible reduction in frames per second of maybe 1 or 2 FPS on average. Stepping over to Action, we have our our H.265 encoder implementation here, and our H.264 encoder implementation here. The interesting thing about these is that they are both running on the same fixed function hardware that the GeForce Experience software is using. So I find it interesting that there's a slight discrepancy here between NVIDIA's implementation and Mirillis Action's implementation. And it's noticeable to the tune of about maybe 5 frames per second or something like that. It's not a severe difference, and it's not going to make or break your recording, but it is interesting to see that there is a difference there. This could be to do with different quality settings that Action implements, perhaps, and we'll get to that in a moment because there is a discernible difference in image quality between what NVIDIA does with the GeForce Experience recording and what Mirillis does with Action. And then finally, this was a bit surprising to me too. This is the AVI recording mode in Action, which means that it's using the CPU for encoding. It's using Mirillis Action's special multi-core encoding solution that runs on the CPU. And the performance is once again reduced by a small margin, but not by nearly as much as one might expect for doing the encoding all on the CPU. And what this says to me is if you don't have a dedicated graphics card, or you have an older dedicated graphics card that doesn't have the NVENC encoder or the AMD equivalent on it, then this is a fantastic solution for running or for doing video encoding or encoding recordings on the CPU, is what I'm trying to say. So I was actually quite impressed with the performance in this mode, despite being the slowest of the lot. Considering it's running on the CPU, it performed quite well. So overall, there is a difference in performance, but as I said, we'll get to the image quality in a moment, and you'll see where the difference is coming from, perhaps. So here we have our second graph, and what we're looking at here is 99th percentile frame time. And in this situation, lower numbers are better. And that's because what you are seeing here is a measure of the time it takes a single frame to be rendered in milliseconds. And so if you have a shorter frame time, it takes fewer milliseconds to render an individual frame, then you have more frames per second, and your gameplay is smoother. So in a sense, this is the inverse of the frames per second graph that we were just looking at. But what 99th percentile frame time gives us a measure of is the smoothness of gameplay from a stutter standpoint. Because if you have frame times that are occasionally spiking up into, over 25, 30, 35 milliseconds, you're going to notice that as a short hitch in your gameplay, just a little stutter. And if your application, your game, is doing that regularly, then that will impact these 99th percentile frame times, and the values will be higher. So what we really want to see here is low 99th percentile frame times. The magic number here is about 16.666, repeating whatever, milliseconds, because that corresponds to 60 FPS. And we see that our 99th percentile frame time for all of our recording modes sits a little bit above that magic threshold. So what this tells us overall, or what it reveals, is that there were some stuttery moments where you might have noticed the frame rate dropping below 60 FPS for a couple of frames, or a frame or two here or there. In my subjective experience watching those benchmarks, I didn't notice too much hitching like that, or any really, so maybe it's not a perceptible thing at this level. But we see what we would expect based on our FPS results. Our no recording and our GeForce experience have the lowest frame times here. Action's implementation of the H.265 and H.264 encoding have slightly higher frame times. And then our CPU-based AVI encoding solution here has the highest average frame times. And in this case, the difference between the MP4 encoders and the CPU encoder is actually a little bit greater than what we saw previously in the average FPS graph. So what that tells us is, while the average FPS using the AVI recording mode was pretty close to the MP4 recording modes, we might expect to see a little bit more stutter, a little bit more hitching using that mode. That's really what we're seeing here. Interestingly, the GeForce experience frame times were actually slightly lower than the no recording frame times. I'm not sure if I believe that, and the difference is so slight that that's within margin of error, so I don't think that's worth reading too much into. But this result for the AVI over here might be worth considering, and just bearing in mind that it might be ever so slightly more stuttery. So those are the numbers that I have for you here, and I hope that that was somewhat revealing as to where Mirillis Action sits in terms of performance impact using those different recording modes. What I'd like to show you now is an image quality comparison, and here you'll see perhaps why it is that Action comes with a slightly higher performance impact. So for the image quality comparison, what I've done here is taken a frame from each recording type, the AVI, Action's implementation of the H.264 and H.265, and then also from the GeForce Experience recording. I've taken a frame from each, and I've zoomed to 400% and cropped in to this particular shot. It's not identical between recording modes, and that's because of the difference in the frame rate between the recording modes, resulting in the perspective being slightly different in each video at this particular point. But at any rate, you'll see what I mean in a moment. And I've labeled it, as you can see down in the bottom left. And what I'm going to be doing is pointing out several features from each of these high zoom crops here, and talking about the difference in detail between each recording mode, and sort of flipping back and forth between the different screenshots. So our first one here is with from the recording done with Action in the AVI recording mode. And you can see that it's a pleasing image. There's no sign of compression artifacts whatsoever. I see none, at least. And that's another thing. You're going to be watching this through YouTube, and YouTube re-encodes these videos once they've been uploaded, and it will introduce compression artifacts of its own. So I'm not even sure if you're going to be able to see the kinds of details that I'm talking about here, but to get the most out of this segment, I highly recommend that you watch on a good, high-resolution screen, whatever you've got, at the highest quality possible, if you really want to be able to see what I'm talking about. And a bigger screen, like a PC screen, is probably better than a phone screen. Ultimately, it's up to you, of course. And I'm not quite sure how much of this detail will come through on YouTube, period, but you've been warned. At any rate, no indication of compression artifacts here. Everything is very nicely anti-aliased. There's no obvious jaggies or anything like that. So this is a pleasing, if somewhat soft image, as you'll see in a moment. But I think this is probably the truest to the output that appears on the screen when actually playing, So if we move over to the next shot here. So this is the shot from, or a shot from, the clip recorded using the Actions implementation of NVIDIA's NVENC H.264 encoder. And if we flip back and forth between the AVI and the H.264, you should be able to see a bit of a difference. Not in the perspective, like I said, that's just a side effect of how I had to do this comparison. But in compression artifacts, for instance, if you look in this tile right here, which is sort of mottled green, you'll see fewer here, and we start to see some blockiness with the MP4 version. Smooth gradients, blockiness. Smooth gradients, blockiness. And what that serves to do is overall, I think maybe there's some kind of sharpening in the H.264 encoding algorithm or something like that, because some of the details in this shot do stand out a little bit better, and in fact overall it looks a bit less soft than the AVI mode. It looks a bit sharper, but that comes at the expense of some of those artifacts in certain areas of the image, those compression artifacts. Overall, though, both look pretty good. I mean, both look very good, in fact. And if this was not blown up to 400% and this was just a moving image at full speed, you would never notice the difference, or it would be very difficult to notice the difference without knowing what you're looking for. Similar story, switching from the H.264 encoding to H.265. They both look, again, very similar, both similarly sharp, both demonstrating, again, some compression artifacts, although perhaps the H.265, this NVENC HVEC, is demonstrating less, although it's hard to make that call. But again, watch this muted sort of green tile here. So we switch back and forth from there to there, from there to there. To my eye, the H.264 looks a little bit blockier. There's more blocky compression artifacts, but it's really, it could go either way, and I don't think we can make much of a call on that one. They both look good, is the important part. Now, here's the interesting part. So here we are on our action recorded H.265 frame. Now let's look at our GeForce Experience frame. Again, there's a shift in perspective, and I do apologize for that, but where I want to draw your attention to in particular is up here where it says Charleston, and we've got this little star insignia. Here we are with the recording from Action, and here we are with the recording from GeForce Experience. And I'll flip back and forth again. Action, GeForce Experience, Action, GeForce Experience. So in Action, our H.265 recording here, there's more detail visible in this star and around the wording in Charleston, around the lettering. When we switch to GeForce Experience, it looks chunkier, and we lose some of our detail. It almost looks like it's been subsampled in a way. It looks like there's bigger pixels or something like that. And the overall effect of that, if you look at some of the other detail areas, like up here in the right, or the detail on these wheat, these farm icons here, is an overall loss of detail when we switch to GeForce Experience. Again, on H.265, recorded in Action, you can see the detail in these, the heads of the wheat here. And we switch to GeForce Experience, and some of that detail starts to get mucky. It doesn't look as distinct or clear. Switch back and forth a few more times here. There, GeForce, Action, GeForce. And we switch back to the H.264 in Action. That detail is still there. It looks very similar between H.264 and 265. But again, as soon as we switch to GeForce Experience, loss of detail across the image. Things look a bit blockier overall. So I thought that was really interesting. Remember, both of these pieces of software are set to record at the highest quality they can, at the highest bit rate they can. So what I take home from this is that although there was a noticeable performance difference between GeForce Experience and Action when using the MP4, the H.264 encoder, or 265, there is a similar difference in image quality, which is in Action's favor. And so if you want the best quality output that you can possibly get from your recordings, the way to go is with Action. GeForce Experience looks good. It looks fine. In fact, I've used it to record most of the gameplay videos you've seen. But nonetheless, there is a demonstrable difference between the image quality recorded using these two pieces of software, and that does come out in Mirillis Action's favor. So, we've talked about a lot of things here, a lot of very fine, minute comparisons in performance and image quality, but let's wrap it all up here and reconvene at the conclusion, where I'll summarize all of this stuff for you guys and give you my final verdict on Mirillis Action. So here we are at the end, once again, summarizing what I felt about Mirillis Action as a piece of screen recording software. And the theme throughout has been, can this piece of paid software that costs a one-time $30 purchase, can it justify its existence in a world full of these free screen recording alternatives? So let's summarize, first of all, what I thought was good and what I thought was a bit less good about Mirillis Action. And as usual, we'll start with the good. So the first thing that I really liked about Mirillis Action, after having used it for a couple of months now, on and off, is that it has a nice, clean, well-organized UI, good presentation, easy to use. Overall, I thought quite intuitive and functional. Another one of Action's great strengths is that it's highly flexible and configurable as a piece of recording and streaming software. And by that I mean you have very granular control over the quality of the video that you're getting and also the performance impact while recording. And if you want that exceptionally high quality video, you can configure it to do that at the cost of a few FPS. It's nice to have that option. Other great features that the software offers are things like H.265 encoding, 120 FPS recording, and critically for me, that feature that lets you film just a portion of the screen, configure exactly the portion of the screen that you want to record. These are all excellent features that really make a case for this software. And as I just said, Action's capable of really high quality video output. The image quality is excellent, as you probably saw in our image quality comparison just a few minutes ago. And it can beat certainly what GeForce Experience is able to record in terms of 1080p video output. Another feather in Action's cap is that it can offer really quite good recording performance when using the CPU for encoding. Other software that I've used, like Fraps for instance, is a real CPU hog when doing that. And if you're in a situation where you don't have a hardware encoding available through a dedicated GPU, then Mirillis Action makes a lot of sense as a CPU-based recording solution that's not going to decimate your frame rates. And finally, I'd like to point out and applaud the fact that the software is frequently updated. Over the couple of months that I've been testing out Action and using it for my video recordings, the software has been updated a couple of times, and it seems like each update has brought some good stability and bug fixes and feature additions and things like that. So it's good to see that this software is well supported and regularly updated. So now we talk about what I didn't like quite as much about Action, and as has been the case for the last couple of relaxing reviews, as a matter of fact, this is going to be a really short list. The first thing that I'd like to point out that I haven't actually mentioned yet is that I could not find an option to pick an installation location while I was installing the software. It by default installs to just the root C drive in its own folder, and it doesn't look like there's a way to change that with the installer. And that irks me. That's a big no-no as far as I'm concerned, because I have my own organizational, folder structure and specific way that I like to install my software, places I like to put it. And so not having that option in the installer just seems like a strange omission, and just something that irks me personally. Maybe it doesn't bother you, but it's just kind of a standard feature that really ought to be included. And finally, the elephant in the room, the really only other major drawback that I can find about this software is that it's not free. And that sounds like a really stupid criticism, because of course with any software, it takes development time and resources, and obviously I understand that, but this software doesn't exist in a vacuum, and it's really hard to beat free, as it turns out. So the question then becomes, do I recommend Mirillis Action, and can it overcome its $30 price tag in order to be a good value in the face of these free alternatives? And the answer is, drumroll please, it depends, of course. Is that a cop-out answer? Maybe, but I'll explain what I mean here. In a vacuum, judged on its own merits, Action is a great piece of software. It's highly functional, highly flexible. It does exactly what it purports to do, and it does it quite well at that. So, of course, I would absolutely recommend it. There's nothing detrimental or to detract from me recommending this software in and of itself on its own merits. In reality, though, Action does not exist in a vacuum, and it has all these competing free alternatives like GeForce Experience, like AMD's Relive or Relive, like OBS, these sorts of things. And taking that into consideration, if you are a casual user and you're just looking to record occasional clips of gameplay or occasionally stream something to the internet, and you don't need advanced functionality or configurability, and you have a GPU that supports hardware encoding, then you're probably pretty well served by the free recording option that comes with your graphics cards, drivers, and software package. Those are generally pretty good, and they get the job done. However, there are a whole variety of use cases or scenarios where you might want something different. You might want an alternative to those solutions. And if any of these scenarios that I'm about to describe fit you, then I would strongly consider checking out Mirillis Action. So maybe you don't have a dedicated GPU that supports hardware accelerated video encoding. Maybe you just use integrated graphics on your CPU, or you've got an older GPU, something that's sort of 5-6 years old, maybe borderline, that doesn't support the hardware encoding. Or maybe you simply want the ability to record video at a higher quality, or at 120 FPS. Or maybe you want to record just a specific section of your screen. That's a good use case for Action as well. Maybe you're an advanced user who likes to really be able to dial in your video quality and performance impact settings, so you appreciate a greater configurability of Mirillis Action. Or maybe you're just a user who is sick and tired of GeForce Experience or the AMD driver equivalent. I've certainly heard or read my fair share of people complaining about a laggy, unintuitive UI with GeForce Experience, or complaining about stability issues and bugginess, all kinds of stuff like that, or the fact that you have to register. You have to make an account to use GeForce Experience now. So if you're one of those folks and you just don't want to have to deal with that stuff, you want a one-time purchase for a reasonable price, then Mirillis Action is an awesome option for screen recording software. And like I said, in and of itself, evaluated on its own merits, I really have nothing bad to say about the software. It's solid, it's highly configurable, flexible, functional. It works as advertised, and I think $30 is a pretty fair price to pay, considering the expanded feature set that you get over and above many of the alternatives. As I've alluded to several times over the course of this review, I myself have been transitioning from using GeForce Experience for my recordings to using Mirillis Action for my recordings, because I find myself in a position where I appreciate its configurability, I appreciate its ability to record just a section, to clip a section of my screen, and I appreciate its higher quality video output options. So for me, it just makes good sense. and I've been liking it quite a lot. As I mentioned at the beginning of the review, if you would like to purchase Mirillis Action for yourself, there is a purchase link down in the video description as usual. And if you're watching this early, like right after it goes up, if you act quickly, you can get a 33% discount on the software. You can snag it for $20 US, which at that price I think is great value. It's a steal, really. And that's going to be probably active for about 12 hours or something after this video goes up. So check it out and see if you can snag it for that sale price. If you can't, if you missed that sale, but you'd still like to have action, like I mentioned at the beginning of the review, I'm going to be doing a giveaway here on the channel where some of you guys, some lucky viewers, are going to get free copies of Mirillis Action, and I'll post a video with more details on how you can get involved in that within the next few days here on the channel, so keep an eye out for that. So that's about all I've got for you here today. That closes the book on Mirillis Action. I'd like to extend a special thank you to Mirillis for providing the software for me to test it out, and also providing the keys, which I'm going to be using in the giveaway that's coming up in a couple of days. I hope you guys found this review informative. I hope you found it relaxing, and I look very forward to having all of you back here next time for another episode of relaxing reviews. Bye for now.